It's great to be here at Reading for the Love of It. I have heard about this conference since I was a kid, both from my mother and from teachers. I was a student at Churchill Heights Public School in Scarborough, which was the home of the Scarborough Gifted Program. So this is the late 70s, early 80s. And the teachers at the school would always come to this conference and then come back with their arms full of books, raving about talks that they'd seen and new books they'd found and so on. So it was always in my mind. So when I was offered the opportunity to come and talk to you today, I was very excited for it. You know, growing up as a shy, very quiet, pale child, I didn't really fit in with the kids on my street, but they tolerated me. I wasn't much for, please, this part doesn't leave the room, I wasn't much for hockey. There's still no sporting bone in my body. There came a point once, I think in my second or third, I guess in my third year of soccer, when I was chewing my fingernails way off on the side of the field, when my dad, in complete frustration, ran over to me and said, "You know you don't have to be here, you don't have to do this." And I said, "I don't?" And that was the end of my sports career. I tended to like to sit in my room and listen to music and read books. And you know, reading for me as a child, it gave me a sense of comfort, but also a sense of adventure. And as a young person, I read a lot of fiction. I read a lot of places to escape. And you know, I was in this gifted program, which was deeply embarrassing to be in. I mean, not when you're actually there in class, but when you have to go home to the kids in your street whose parents are somehow mad that you're in it. It was a strange, I mean, it must have been hard for my parents, I think, too, because, you know, as much as everybody you want to believe your kid is special or has a gift or a talent, you also don't want them to be, you don't want to be the one to say, well, my kid's extra special. You know, there's a certain sense of Canadian middle-class humility that we have to maintain. And I think I struck a good balance by being kind of at the bottom of my class in the gifted program, though. I hope that made my parents proud. You know, I know people will talk about literacy and numeracy and so on, but I have no numeracy skills. And this was a great source of amusement for my father, because at one point, probably about grade 6, they realized that some of the kids didn't really have the basics of mathematics. So they divided us into 3 different math groups, and I was in the lowest math group. And I came home, because I was failing, I sucked at math. And I'd come home and tell my father that I was in the lowest math group, and he thought this was hilarious, because he's like, "You're in the lowest math group in a gifted program." I said, I can't do my times tables. So he could never quite understand that. He thought it was really funny, but it just wasn't where my mind went. My mind went to language and to art and to music. And as I got older, you know, I would kind of dance around. I would go from you know, be really into visual art, and then I would get really into writing again. And then I would get into dramatic arts. And luckily at my school we had really great, inspiring teachers. I had a teacher named Mr. Downey who actually, in my most recent album, in page 1, I had him design the album cover to look like a library book from the Scarborough Public Library. This is a great thing about social media, is that when I was trying to get the artwork together, I wanted to get the Scarborough Public Library symbol on the pocket of the book, and of course couldn't find any of the books that I'd stolen from the Scarborough Public Library. So I went out on Twitter and said, "Anybody have one of these, like something from the Scarborough Public Library that I can steal?" And within 5 minutes, someone had sent me a picture of a book they'd stolen from the Scarborough Book. So that's now on the inside of the book. But on the card that's in the pocket, I wrote names of or signatures of some of my favorite teachers as well as my kids. So one of them was Mr. Downey, who was our French teacher, but he was a very theatrical, small man who would do stuff like we had our desks all together, and he would dance down the desk singing, "It's time to play the music, it's time to light the lights," and but he's very passionate about it. You know, if you weren't paying attention, he'd scream at you, right in your face, and he'd turn beet red. And then later he'd apologize and tell some hilarious joke, and we'd all laugh and love it. But what this guy did was he'd write musicals. He called them operettas, and basically he'd write a play about, you know, a bunch of kids who went to camp or you know, were on a trip to Europe, school trip to Europe or whatever, and then he would string together songs from the Broadway stage over the years. So he would just kind of insert these inside this musical. So exposed a bunch of kids in grades 5, 6, 7, and 8 to this whole world of music and of theater. And this was the big event for us every year, were these great experiences in these operettas. I never had a lead. I got to play Steve, who had like 2 lines, but I still know every single one of those songs from all those musicals by heart. And when I went to high school, I went to Woburn Collegiate, and I joined the Scarborough School's youth choir. And our conductor was from the music department in Scarborough, named Elgarth Allen. And again, incredibly passionate, and would teach us, you know, force us to be the best choir we could be. And we would sing music from operas and liturgical music and popular music and so on, but we would learn to pronounce things in German and Latin and Italian and French and English. And it was a great sense of learning together. There was also a social situation. It was once a week. And of course, I couldn't wait to go and look at the girls and but also sing. And this was like the first time that I really got that sense of like when you're singing with abandon, but also concentrating very hard. You're not just bleeding out notes, but you're really pushing everything you have into this. And you can feel the vibrations between yourself and the other singers around you. And when you're really hitting it, and everybody's in tune, and every note is in time, and everybody's focused on the conductor, there's a sense of magic. And that, at that point, I knew that's what I wanted from life. I didn't know I could actually be a singer myself, like as a profession, but I knew I wanted to always have that in my life. What I always thought I wanted to do was to be a writer. I loved to write, and I was very lucky to have teachers who forced me to learn to write.